Now, I remember her as a very short, very small, petite woman. Even when I was a young child, she seemed small. Maybe that's because those of us in the Tanzer family were all tall. She was not. But she wore beautiful clothes, and she was herself a very beautiful woman. But that small stature and elegant beauty belied a strong and tough woman. There was the story I heard actually many times when she worked behind the cash register in Walgreens in the heart of Chicago. A man snuck out of the door right where Elsie was working without stopping to pay for his merchandise. Well, this diminutive woman stopped everything she was doing and chased him down the sidewalks of Chicago, finally downing her with her swinging purse. I am sure that shoplifter had looked at her and had totally misjudged how she would react to his actions. Well, another story I heard quite often was how she took a stranger into her home as a foster child. He was 13 years old and had lived his whole young life in orphanages to that point. And it must have taken great strength and great courage to become a foster mother to this child, who later on was nicknamed by his friends Wild Bill. But my name for him was Dad. This courageous woman was Elsie Molitor, but to me, Grandma. Now, Dad lived with the Molitors for 5 years. Someone asked me at the early service, was Elsie married? Yes, she was, but it's Mother's Day, so we're only talking about her. But Dad lived with the Molitors for 5 years until he enlisted in the Army during World War II, and then when the war was over, he returned to their house and married my mother a few years later, and of course got a job. But even after Dad had left the Molitors' home to make a family of his own, he always included his foster parents, who he called Mom and Dad, in family activities like birthday parties, and we had many, Christmas celebration, Easter egg hunts, etc., etc. And they always came, and they always brought gifts for us. Well, when we moved from Chicago to Los Angeles, we stayed in touch with Elsie over the phone and visited every summer when we made those arduous, long cross-country road trips, camping each night. And when Elsie got older and moved to a nursing home, by that time my mom and dad had moved to Tennessee, so Chicago was a bit closer, but they went up there frequently. My dad with his harmonica so he could entertain her and all her friends at the nursing home. And when Elsie died, of course the Tanzers were present at her funeral to honor her. Well, Elsie was truly a shepherd to my father as a teenager, probably and beyond. She nurtured him and taught him, because he had never been part of a family really, but taught him what it meant to be part of a family and how members of a loving family supported each other and loved each other and helped each other. And she provided him a safe place to sleep and good food to eat and encouraged him with his high school studies. It was a real home, his first one. She saw to it that he attended her church, Drexel Park Presbyterian in Chicago, a church where years later he met the love of his life, my mother. There were times, I am sure, Elsie had to be tough with her foster son, but I know, and now all of you know too, that she had toughness in her. So what was it about their relationship, this foster mother and foster child, that kept them together and connected all those years? It was love. And when Dad had a family of his own and Elsie was moving into old age, Dad, the one who had been nurtured, became the one who was the nurturer. And he could do this because he had been paying attention to her all those years and learned how to be a nurturer, learned how to be a shepherd. And isn't it appropriate that today, Good Shepherd Sunday, also falls on Mother's Day? It often does not, but this year it does. Because isn't being a good mother all about being a good shepherd? But as we know, not all shepherds are foster mothers or even fathers. All of us, young and old, have chances in our lives to step out in faith and help someone in need. Not out of some obligation, not because we're doing something good and someone will give us a gold star, not at all, but because our love of God and neighbor compels us to rise up in love to be shepherds. I think I already know the answer to this, but can you think of some people who have shepherded you over the years? My list is long, and I bet yours is too. If we are looking for someone holding a shepherd's crook with a lamb over their shoulders, perhaps we're looking in the wrong place, and we'll miss the true shepherds in our life. Maybe we need instead to look at that person who brings a casserole to your home when you cannot cook, you've been ill or whatever. Maybe it's someone who drives you to a doctor's office. If you're in school, maybe it's someone who comes and sits with you when you're all alone at that cafeteria table. These are our shepherds, and we will know them by their loving deeds. Of course, all of us, we are all shepherded by that same good shepherd, Jesus the Christ. And we can open any gospel to read about all the ways Jesus nurtured those he met and taught them a healthier and more loving way to live life and relate to God and their neighbors. We can see how he cared for his disciples and continually taught them, and then taught them again, and then corrected them when they misunderstood what he was saying totally. He didn't correct them in anger, but so they would get it right and could themselves be good shepherds when he was gone. And we know that this good shepherd, Jesus, continues to guide, direct, correct, teach, and love us today. Well, a number of years ago, I attended a workshop on how to teach Sunday school using the Godly Play curriculum. Is anyone familiar with that? Yay! Not too many, but some. It's a rather unique style of teaching children that, for one thing, teaches them that their Sunday school room is a holy place. And so when they come to Sunday school, they line up. They don't go in the room. They line up in the hallway. And then when it's time to come in, the teacher will call them by name and bring them into the holy place. And the presence of Christ is recognized in that room by lighting a candle each Sunday. And that candle stays lit through the whole time that they're together. And at the end, it's blown out. And the smoke, the little bit of smoke that is left of the candle flame, fills the room and fills the church and fills our town and fills the world with the love of Christ. The centerpiece of the class is the weekly story. And it is told with absolutely wonderful props. Do you remember the props? Oh, they're great. And in a style that is kind of wondering, so that children can use their own imagination, something I'm going to call on you to use in just a sec. But anyway, the children can use their own imaginations to love God and learn more about God. So, back to the workshop. The story told us at the workshop complete with all the props, which I do not have today, and that's where your imagination needs to kick in, was the story of the Good Shepherd. First, there was a gold box, big, this deep, and it was opened up, and the first thing to come out was a big piece of green felt, and it was smoothed over the floor like this, very large piece. And then the teacher reached in, and there was a much smaller, like this size, blue felt, and she put that on the green felt. And she reached in again and got smaller pieces of kind of jagged-shaped black felt, several pieces, and she put them together in another corner on the green felt. Then there were many pieces of brown felt about this big, and she took those out, and she started laying them out, think building a log cabin here, laying them out like this, these two and then these two and these two, so that it built up some dimension when she was finished. We decided, because we were wondering in that class, we decided that the green was a patch of grass with a pond and some rocks. And we knew that this enclosure made by that brown felt was a sheep pen, particularly when the teacher reached into the box again and took out tiny sheep, wooden sheep that she put in that enclosure, one for each person at the workshop. Well, the Good Shepherd then came out, and he was put in the pen with all the sheep. And he was there a while, and then he opened the felt gate and guided each sheep to the grass where they could eat and to the pond where they could drink. And he led them through those dangerous rocks that were over here so that they would not get lost or hurt. But he stayed there because if they did get into any kind of trouble, he was there to help, even to the point of laying down his life for the sheep. Well, after a day of grazing, he led them back to the safety of the sheep pen for the night, calling each by name as they entered. And as it turned out at this workshop, their names were our names. And if you think about it, weren't we all called here today by that same Good Shepherd who knows us and calls us by name to this sheepfold, if you will, this place of safety and learning and loving our fellow sheep? And there's a holy place here where we can eat and drink and be nourished every Sunday. And when it is time for us to go back out into the world, we are told, actually Sandy tells us, to share our experience of Christ with others and spread the good news. And so we do. And that good news was shared many years ago to Elsie Molitor, who shared it with Bill Tanzer, and both were shepherds to many, many people, even me. And I take great comfort in knowing that both of them now have journeyed on, having been called by name by the great shepherd, who continues to love and cherish them. Amen.